The house on Cypress Lane was the sort of place that made people stop and stare. Cream-painted walls, green shutters, a trimmed lawn, and a white wooden fence that never needed repainting. Neighbors said it looked like a doll's house. And from the outside, it did. Inside, though, it was a different story entirely. I was 8 years old the first time I realized something was wrong. My mother, Carol, stood in the kitchen like she always did, her long blonde hair pinned back, her hands scrubbing the counter long after it was clean. She smiled too much, too tightly, and only when my father was in the room. Dad, Henry, was a lawyer with a voice like gravel and rules that changed depending on his mood. At school, they told us families were meant to be safe. At home, silence was survival. "Don't touch the thermostat," he'd growl. "Don't close your door. Don't answer the phone unless I say." The house might have been picture perfect, but it felt more like a museum. Everything was to be observed, not used. My older sister, Emily, learned early how to play the game. She was 14 and already an expert in shrinking herself. Straight as clean clothes, no opinions. She whispered advice to me when she could. Stay out of Dad's way. Always agree with Mom. Never cry where they can see. But I didn't want to play their game. I asked too many questions. I laughed too loud. I left fingerprints on the glass. And every time I did, Dad reminded me who held the power in that house. There was a moment I still remember clearly. It was summer. The sun was pouring through the windows. I was sitting on the floor, drawing dinosaurs. My dad walked in, took one look at the mess of crayons, and his face turned to stone. He didn't shout. That would have been easier. Instead, he crouched beside me, took the drawing from my hands, and calmly ripped it in half. "You're wasting your time," he said. "No one's going to care about your silly drawings. Grow up." I remember the crinkle of paper, the way my mother looked away, the way Emily silently gathered the crayons while blinking back tears. That was the day I understood love in our house was conditional, earned, measured, controlled. And I started to learn how to hide parts of myself too. By the time I was 10, I had memorized every creaky floorboard in the house. I knew which ones to avoid after bedtime and which corners were safest to hide in when the yelling started. Silence had become a second language. Fear, a permanent houseguest. My father's rules were not written down. They changed like the wind. One day it was, "Don't speak during dinner." The next it was, "Why are you so quiet?" He expected obedience, but punished hesitation. The unpredictability turned every mealtime into a test. We never knew the right answer until it was too late. Mom became a ghost of a woman. She moved through the house like a shadow, always cleaning, always tidying, always watching his moods like a weather report. Her voice was syrup-sweet around him and dry as dust when he was gone. She called it keeping the peace. Emily called it surviving. I started having nightmares. Not monsters or ghosts, but dreams where I said the wrong thing, wore the wrong shirt, forgot to take my shoes off indoors. I would wake up breathless, heart pounding, and stare at the ceiling wondering if today would be the day I pushed him too far. At school, teachers praised my quietness. "Such a polite boy," they'd say, ruffling my hair. They had no idea that I didn't speak much because I was afraid to say the wrong thing. They saw a model student. They didn't see the tightness in my shoulders or the way I flinched at sudden movements. Emily had grown sharper. Not colder, just smarter. She knew how to smile when spoken to and disappear when not needed. She whispered plans to me at night, dreams of moving far away. "One day," she said, "we won't need to tiptoe around anyone. You'll see. We'll breathe easy." But I didn't believe her then. The walls of that house felt permanent. Solid. Like they would always close in if we dared to stretch. One Sunday evening, after Dad lost a big case at work, he threw a glass across the kitchen. It shattered against the wall, just inches from Mom's head. She didn't scream. She just bent down and swept the pieces as if it were routine. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching her hands bleed from a shard she missed. She caught me looking and gave the faintest shake of her head. A warning. A plea. "Do not speak." So I turned away. And I hated myself for it. Middle school was where I perfected the art of pretending. Smiling at jokes I did not find funny. Laughing just enough. Keeping my sleeves pulled low, even in spring. I became an expert at looking normal.
It was a performance, really.
And I was always on stage. Emily had it harder. She was 15, with fire in her blood. She started answering back. Not loudly, but with little things. She would come home late, wear lipstick, listen to music too loud. It was her way of saying she still had power, even if only in slivers. Our father did not like slivers. He wanted obedience carved in stone. One night, I heard them arguing through the wall. His voice a storm. Hers, like thunder refusing to back down. Then the slap. The silence after. I did not sleep that night. Neither did she. In the morning, she had a bruise on her cheek. She didn't try to cover it. She wore it like a badge. But when I asked if she was okay, she just said, "I've had worse." Then she added, "But so have you." And she was right. My bruises weren't on my skin. They were inside. In the way I startled when someone raised their hand too fast. In the way I couldn't relax, even when things were calm. In the way I kept my bag packed with essentials, just in case we had to run. I didn't even know where we would go. But it felt safer to be ready. Mom had started drinking more. Quietly in the evenings. A glass of wine at first. Then two. Then something stronger. She would sit at the kitchen table, eyes vacant, listening to the ticking clock. I wanted to ask her why she stayed. Why she let him turn us into shadows. But I already knew the answer. Because leaving him would mean admitting something was broken. And in her world, broken things got swept under the rug, not thrown away. At school, there was a teacher, Mr. Granger. He taught English and always noticed when someone was off. One day, he asked if I was all right.
Just that.
"Are you all right?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him everything. But the words stuck in my throat. So I just nodded. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." I never took him up on it. But I remembered it. Because sometimes, knowing someone sees you is the only thing keeping you from disappearing completely. That year, Emily started saving money. Babysitting, tutoring, anything she could. She hid it in a hollow book on her shelf. She said, "When I turn 18, I'm leaving. And I'm taking you with me." I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Not really. Because leaving felt like a fairy tale. But she believed. And that belief became a light in the dark. And in a house like ours, even the smallest light could feel like hope. Emily's 18th birthday arrived like a silent revolution. There were no candles, no cake, no celebration. But there was a quiet defiance in her posture, a kind of strength that pulsed beneath her skin like electricity. She had made it. She was legally an adult. And that, she believed, was her ticket out. She had almost $1,000 saved. Enough, she said, to get a bus out of town, find a job, maybe rent a room. She packed her bags slowly, methodically. Every item was chosen with care. She even had a plan, bus schedules, job listings printed from the school computer lab, and a friend in Sacramento who had offered a couch. But then something happened. Our father found the book. The hollow one. The one with the money. I do not know how. Maybe he was snooping. Maybe he just got suspicious. Maybe the universe was cruel. But he found it. The night he did, the air in the house turned thick. Like it could snap under the weight of what was coming. I sat on the stairs, frozen, as he stood in her doorway. The book in his hand, pages fanned open like an accusation. He did not yell. That was worse. He just looked at her with this cold, hollow stare and said, "You think you can run?" Emily did not answer. She just stood tall, eyes locked with his. I saw something pass between them then. Not fear. Not quite. It was like she was daring him to try and break her. That night, he did not hit her. He hit the wall. He punched straight through the plaster, right next to her head, and left a gaping hole like a wound. Then he turned and walked away, the book still clutched in his hand. Emily stayed in her room all night, shaking. I lay awake in mine, heart pounding. The sound of that impact echoed in my ears long after the silence returned. The next day, she was gone. She left before dawn. With just a backpack and a bus ticket she must have hidden elsewhere. I found a note under my pillow. It said, "I'm not leaving you. I'm just getting ready. I'll come back for you. I promise." And she did. But in the meantime, I was alone. For weeks after she left, the house was quieter, but not safer. Our father barely spoke. When he did, it was in clipped commands. Dinner. School. Clean that up. Mom drifted like a ghost, her wine glass never empty. I began walking to school the long way, adding 10 extra minutes just to delay going home. And then one day, something cracked. I had come home late. Not too late. Just enough. Enough to be noticed. He was waiting in the living room. The silence was heavy. I could feel it pressing against my skin. "Where were you?" he asked. I said, "Library." He stepped forward. "Do not lie to me." I could not breathe. My voice trembled when I said, "I'm not lying." Then he raised his hand. I flinched before he even touched me. And he saw it. Something in him shifted. Just for a moment. His hand dropped. His mouth moved like he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. He just turned away. I stood there, heart racing, and realized something. He was afraid. Not of me, but of what he had become. Or maybe of what I now knew. That fear gave me strength. Not a lot, but enough. That night, I started my own plan. Emily had shown me the way. And now it was my turn. I began collecting small secrets like Emily had. Not money, though that would come later. I collected moments, patterns, things people said when they thought no one was listening. At school, I started staying behind in the library, not just to delay going home, but to read. To research. I looked up shelters, legal advice, anything I could quietly memorize or copy into my notebooks. I even started writing letters. Long letters I would never send, addressed to Emily. I hid them beneath the loose floorboard in my room, where she used to keep her diary. Writing gave me a strange, sort of power. It made me feel less trapped. Like I could still reach her, even from this prison of painted smiles and cracked walls. Then, one afternoon, a letter arrived. It was addressed to me. No return address. Just my name, handwritten in soft ink I recognized immediately. Emily. I shut myself in the bathroom and locked the door before opening it. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. I'm safe. I'm staying with people who care. I'm working now, part-time, and studying. I haven't forgotten you. I'm coming back when I can. Stay strong. Hide your letters. Someone might be watching. I love you. I read those words over and over until they blurred. Then I flushed the letter, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I copied it into my notebook from memory and buried it with the others under the floorboard. It became my secret ritual. Each night, I wrote to her. About my day, about Dad, about Mom's slow descent into silence and wine, about how the walls seemed thinner now, and how I could hear everything, the footsteps, the creaks, the distant arguments muffled behind closed doors. And then, another change. Mom began talking to herself. Or perhaps she always had, and I had only just started to notice. She wandered the kitchen at odd hours, muttering names from the past. Sometimes Emily's. Sometimes mine. Sometimes someone I had never heard of. Once, she dropped a wine glass and stared at the shards for nearly 10 minutes before I dared to speak. I asked her if she was all right. She blinked, like waking from a dream. "You're not supposed to see this," she whispered, then walked away. I began to wonder if she, too, had once tried to leave. If she had failed. A few weeks later, a package came. Small. Wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine. Inside was a burner phone. No note. No instructions. Just the phone, turned off and charged. I knew who it was from. I waited until night to switch it on. There was one contact saved under a fake name. I sent a single message. "Is it you?" The reply came instantly. "Yes. I'm close. Be ready." My hands shook again, but not from fear. From hope. It was happening. Emily was coming back. But nothing in our lives had ever been that simple. Because just as the light started to flicker back into my world, something else cracked. Dad found one of the notebooks. He never said a word. He simply placed it on my bed, open, with a single word scrawled across the page in red ink. Liar. No context. No explanation.
Just that.
The next day, the floorboard was nailed shut. He had found the rest. I cried in the bathroom that night. Silent tears, because if I sobbed, he might hear. And then the phone buzzed. I'm outside. I looked out the window, and there she was. Emily. Hair shorter, clothes plainer, but her eyes, those same fierce, unbroken eyes. She held up a finger to her lips. Silence. Then she mouthed 3 words. I've got you. The wind was cool that night, brushing through the curtains like a whisper of what was about to change. I stared down at Emily from the bedroom window, heart thudding in my chest. She gave a tiny nod, then vanished into the shadows near the garden wall. I had rehearsed this moment in my head for months, what I would pack, how I would climb out, which step would creak the least on the staircase. But now that it was real, my limbs felt frozen. I reached under my mattress and pulled out a small cloth bag. Just clothes, a few coins, and the burner phone. I stared at the floorboard, the one he had nailed shut. I felt like part of me was still trapped under there. I slipped on my shoes without tying them, heart hammering faster with every second. I listened at my bedroom door. Silence. Only the sound of the television humming in the lounge downstairs. I opened the window as quietly as I could and lowered myself onto the narrow ledge beneath. From there, I climbed onto the trellis, the same one Emily used to sneak down from years ago. It wobbled under my weight, but I held firm. The second my feet touched the ground, I ran. Emily caught me before I hit the street. She held my face in her hands, eyes glistening with relief.
We didn't speak.
There was no need. She took my hand, and we ran. We ducked through alleyways and back streets, lit only by the orange glow of distant streetlights. Every sound made me jump, the echo of a bin lid, the far-off screech of tires. But Emily didn't flinch. She was calm, sharp, focused. She had done this before. We reached a rusted gate behind a crumbling brick building. Emily tapped 3 times, paused, then tapped twice. The gate opened from the inside. A tall woman in a navy hoodie looked us up and down, then stepped aside. "This is her?" she asked. Emily nodded. "She's my sister." The woman nodded back. "You're safe now. Come inside." The room was warm and smelled faintly of lavender and old books. There were others, women and children, some sleeping, some reading, all quiet. I had never seen so many people in one place who looked exhausted but free. Emily led me to a cot in the corner. I sat down, unsure if I should cry or smile. "Where are we?" I whispered. "A transitional safe house," she replied. "Run by people who know what we've been through." "How did you find it?" She hesitated. "After I left, I was on the street for a while. Then I found them. They helped me, no questions asked. I told them about you, about Mum. I asked if we could bring you too, when the time was right." I stared at her, the weight of everything sinking in. "Mum, will she be okay?" Emily looked away. "I don't know. She's complicated. But we'll try, when we're stronger." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the cot, listening to the slow, steady breathing around me, the creak of someone shifting in their bed, the distant hum of city traffic, like a lullaby for the broken. But in the stillness, I felt it for the first time in years.
Peace.
The next morning, I woke to the smell of pancakes. A woman in her 50s was cooking in the small kitchen, flipping golden rounds with practiced ease. Emily sat beside me with a plate already in hand. "There's a plan," she said between bites. "We'll get you enrolled in school again. Somewhere new. No records linking you to him. We'll talk to a lawyer when we're ready. They're already helping me." I looked around at the shelter. I saw faces like mine, scared, hopeful, healing. But what if he finds us? Emily's eyes hardened. "He won't. And if he tries, we'll be ready." Just as she said that, The woman in the hoodie from the night before entered, phone in hand. Her face was pale. She handed the phone to Emily. "It's Mom," she said quietly. "She's at the police station." My stomach dropped. Emily took the phone. "Hello." A pause. Then her face went gray. "She turned him in," she whispered. A silence fell across the room. Then Emily looked at me, tears rising in her eyes. She told them everything. The waiting room at the police station was nothing like I had imagined. Cold tiles, flickering lights, the scent of cheap coffee lingering in the air. Emily sat next to me, her leg bouncing anxiously. Across from us, a laminated poster about domestic violence stared back with haunting accuracy. A female officer approached and called Emily's name. We stood, hands clasped tightly. She led us down a quiet hallway, then into a small interview room. There, seated at a metal table with a pale blanket wrapped around her shoulders, was Mum. She looked older, fragile. Her eyes were swollen, lips chapped, and fingers trembling as she clutched a plastic cup of water. When she looked up and saw us, she broke down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have done it sooner. I should have protected you." I stood frozen. All the fury I had stored over the years battled with an overwhelming wave of pity. Emily moved first. She sat beside Mum, gently taking her hand. The officer introduced herself as Detective Ramos. She was calm, composed, and spoke to us like we mattered. She explained that Mum had walked into the precinct that morning and told them everything about the years of control, the hidden bruises, the money, the threats. "She has made a full statement," Ramos said. "It corroborates much of what we already suspected from earlier tips. We've already taken him into custody." I blinked. "He's arrested?" Ramos nodded. "Charged with coercive control, physical abuse, unlawful imprisonment. It won't be easy, but we have a strong case." Mum looked at me. Her lips trembled.
I was so scared, she said.
"I thought if I stayed quiet, it would protect you. I didn't know it was destroying you." I couldn't speak. I felt as though I were standing at the edge of a cliff, wind in my ears, not knowing whether to jump or retreat. Emily spoke softly. "It's not over. But you did something brave. You did the right thing." The days that followed passed in a blur. We were placed under temporary protection, and the shelter arranged a therapist for me. Her name was Diane, and she had kind eyes and a voice that didn't demand but invited. In our sessions, I slowly peeled away the layers of myself that had been hidden for so long. I spoke of the silent dinners, the clenched fists, the icy glares that could freeze time. I spoke of the time he locked me in the basement because I forgot to sweep the garage. Diane didn't cry. She just listened. And sometimes that was enough. One afternoon, Emily sat with me in the sun-drenched courtyard of the safe house. Birds chirped nearby, and for a moment, it almost felt like we were kids again, before everything fell apart. "What happens now?" I asked. She shrugged.
"Court.
Statements. Maybe even testimony. But we won't be alone. And we're stronger now." I thought about Mom. I had visited her a few times. Each time, she seemed more like herself, less like the ghost she had become. She spoke of leaving California, of starting anew once everything was done. "You think she'll make it out?" Emily nodded. "She has to." That night, I found myself writing again, something I hadn't done in years. The pages poured out of me. Not poetry this time, but memory. Stories. The truth, scrawled in ink across paper that would one day, perhaps, help someone else feel less alone. Weeks passed. The day of the pretrial hearing arrived. I stood beside Emily, hand in hand, as we walked into the courthouse. Mum was already there, dressed in a modest navy suit, her face tired but resolved. He was led in wearing handcuffs. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, not the towering figure that had once cast shadows over every part of our lives. He didn't look at us. And for the first time, I didn't feel afraid. The judge read the charges. His solicitor whispered frantically in his ear, but he said nothing. When asked to plead, his voice came low and cold. "Not guilty." A flicker of fear passed through me. But then Emily's grip tightened. "We're going to fight," she whispered. Every single lie. Every moment he tried to erase. We'll make sure they all see it. I nodded, because for the first time, we had more than fear. We had the truth. The courtroom smelled of old paper and polished wood. Rows of seats stretched behind us, mostly empty, except for a few reporters scribbling in notebooks and a couple of unfamiliar faces who might have been from advocacy groups. The walls were tall and imposing, the silence heavy enough to crush a whisper. Emily sat on my left, Mum on my right, all three of us dressed in navy blue, as if in quiet solidarity. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution spoke first, outlining a decade of coercion, manipulation, and violence. They called it a pattern of sustained abuse, and every word felt like a stone being dropped into the room. When the defense spoke, I saw his solicitor paint him as a misunderstood man, strict but not cruel, private but not secretive. They called us emotional, misremembering, manipulated by the media. I could barely keep still in my seat. The first witness was a neighbor from our old street, a soft-spoken woman named Carol. She said she often heard shouting, that she once saw my mother with a bruised eye and called the police, though nothing came of it. The defense tried to discredit her, saying she had misinterpreted what she heard. Next came my old teacher, Mr. Langdon. He recalled the change in me, how I had gone from an eager child to a withdrawn, distracted teen. He said he tried to intervene, but my father had insisted everything was just a phase. I had never known he cared that much. Then came the day I had to testify. I stood in the witness box, palms sweating, heart thudding against my ribs. I looked out at the courtroom and saw him, expressionless, jaw tight, eyes cold. And then I looked at Emily, at Mum, at the judge. I took a deep breath. I spoke about the first time he hit me, how he blamed me for Mum's failings, how he made me sleep outside one night when I didn't wash the dishes properly. I told him about the time he broke my phone and said it was my fault for being too sneaky. I talked about the silence he demanded, the lies he forced us to tell. The defense cross-examined me, trying to twist my words, but I stayed firm. Each question they asked was a match, and each answer I gave was water to put it out. I would not let them rewrite what I had lived through. Afterwards, Emily took the stand. Her testimony was quieter, more composed, but it cut deeper. She described nights of hearing our mother sob in the bathroom, of being locked in her room for hours. She recounted how he once took her pet rabbit away as punishment and never returned it. Then Mum testified. Her voice trembled at first, but soon it found strength. She painted the full picture, the control, the fear, the threats of harm if she ever left. She admitted to mistakes, to staying too long, to believing his lies. But she never faltered in naming what he did. He stole years from us, she said. From my children. From me. In the final days, the courtroom became a battlefield of evidence. Photos. Financial records. Medical reports. Police calls that had gone unanswered or unrecorded. The prosecution wove it all together with precision. The defense tried to argue that there was no proof of ongoing abuse, that it was all exaggerated or misunderstood. But the cracks in their case widened with every passing hour. On the last day, the judge gave instructions to the jury. We waited for 3 hours while they deliberated. I could barely sit still, pacing the corridor outside the courtroom, clutching Emily's arm like a lifeline. Then the door opened. The court officer called us back in. We stood, breath held. The jury foreperson stood and read the verdict. Guilty. On all counts. I did not cry. Neither did Emily. Mum reached for our hands, and the three of us stood there, silent but united, as he was led away in handcuffs. He didn't look back. Outside, the sky was pale blue, the air crisp with the early breeze of spring. The world had not changed, but we had. The silence after the trial was unlike any we had known before. Not the kind that came from fear or punishment, but one filled with possibility, with space. For weeks, it felt strange to wake up and not brace for a slammed door or a raised voice. The world seemed louder without him in it, birdsong, traffic, even laughter drifting in through the window. I had never realized how quiet we had been forced to become. Mum started seeing a therapist, someone gentle who let her speak without interruption. She came home with tear-streaked cheeks but lighter steps. Emily began drawing again, her sketchbooks overflowing with charcoal lines and color. She drew women with wings, girls walking into forests, families holding hands beneath starlit skies. And me? I started writing. Not for school or for anyone else. Just for me. Pages and pages of memories, fragments of feelings I had buried. I wrote about the good things too. The time Emily and I built a fort in the living room while Mum cooked stew, the secret smiles we shared when he wasn't looking. I enrolled in community college. Psychology. It felt like a way to make sense of everything. I wanted to understand not just what had happened to us, but why it happens at all. We moved into a new flat in Long Beach. It was small and a bit run down, but it had a balcony and warm sunlight in the mornings. No memories clung to the walls, and for once, we were not afraid of shadows. The media tried to latch onto the case, an article here, a segment there. But we kept to ourselves. Changed numbers. New routines. New names, even for Mum and Emily. I kept mine. I wanted the world to know that I had survived. There were still hard days. Nights when I jolted awake from dreams of courtroom floors and cracked voices. Sometimes, we'd see a man who looked like him on the street or hear a voice that resembled his. We learned not to flinch, not always, but we still checked over our shoulders. Emily asked me once, "Will it ever stop feeling like we're broken?" I didn't have a perfect answer, but I told her the truth. Maybe we won't be who we were before, but we get to decide who we are next. That seemed to comfort her. It comforted me too. We celebrated birthdays again. Quietly, with cake and candles and no apologies. Mum started knitting. Emily got a part-time job at a bookstore. I spent more and more evenings at the local library, where the quiet was safe and the air smelled like paper and healing. Bit by bit, we became more than what we had been through. One morning, as we sat on the balcony drinking tea, Mum looked out at the horizon and said, "I think we're going to be all right." I believed her. Years passed as they always do. Seasons shifted, birthdays came and went, and our scars faded. Not entirely, but enough. The pain no longer ruled our days. It became part of the architecture beneath our skin, shaping us but not defining us. I stood in front of a crowded room in downtown Los Angeles, holding a microphone that trembled slightly in my hand. It was a small gathering, support workers, students, survivors. I had been invited to speak, to share my story, though for weeks I had questioned whether I had the right. But then I saw the faces in the room. Some alert and curious, others hesitant and guarded, the way we had once been. I realized I wasn't there to relive the past. I was there because someone else might need to know they could survive it too. I started from the beginning, not with horror or shame, but with truth. I told them about the man who smiled for the neighbors and roared behind closed doors. I told them about the nights when we whispered under blankets, the strength it took to call for help, and the day the door finally closed behind him. I spoke about fear, about love twisted into control. But I also spoke about healing, about therapy, art, and community. I talked about the power of being believed. The silence after I finished was thick with emotion. Then, one by one, hands reached for mine. Not to offer pity, but connection. Gratitude. A young woman approached me after the event. Her eyes were damp, but steady. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "You're not," I said. "You never were." Back home, I found Emily curled up on the sofa with a novel in her lap, her hair now streaked with pink and her laughter fuller than it had ever been. Mum was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she chopped vegetables, her knitting bag tucked under the table. I sat with them, the glow of our little flat wrapping around us like a warm quilt. Later that night, I wrote the final sentence in the notebook I had kept for years. The one filled with rage, sorrow, memories, and hope. "We survived," I wrote. "And we are not just surviving, we are living." I closed the book, placed it on the shelf, and opened a fresh one. A new chapter. A new life. The past would always be there, but it no longer controlled us. We had reclaimed our story. And now it was ours to tell.